Should America have a national divorce? Now, I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene should really be a representative at all. She's the house you tell your kids to avoid on Halloween. But her question does represent the thinking of a lot of Americans on both sides. Ben Shapiro floated the idea that our best hope now is a friendly separation of states. 66% of Republicans in the South say they would support secession.
We're going to fight it out. And I'm telling you, I've always said I'm not afraid of the Civil War and the GOP. I lean into it.
Marjorie Taylor Greene wants a national divorce, a de facto civil war. And like you heard, she's not alone.
I just feel like if we're to this point, maybe we should consider that you have your blue states and we have our red states.
The last few days, she called for the U.S. to be separated into red and blue states. We need a national divorce. We need to separate by red states and blue states and shrink the federal government. Everyone I talk to says this, from the sick and disgusting woke culture issues shoved down our throats to the Democrats' traitorous to America last policies. We are done.
Have you guys been following 4chan, Q, any of that stuff?
Greene, as you're probably aware, is out of her mind. From Who is Q?
Q is trying to tell people on these forums and 4chan, and he's trying to tell people the truth.
To 9/11 conspiracies, to accusations that Muslim congresswomen need to be impeached because they didn't take the oath of office on the Bible?
I have a lot of questions about that.
Greene's not the first Republican to call for secession, and there are indications that support for secession has been growing since Trump's big lie after losing the 2020 election.
I want to tell you, Republican voters support him still. The party is his.
A poll by YouGov found that 66% of Southern Republicans supported leaving the U.S. and forming a new country.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
In case you forgot, they tried that 150 years ago, and it not only failed, but as a punishment, the North forced them to listen almost exclusively to country music.
I got a question for you. How do you get avid gun owners and people that support the Second Amendment to give up their guns and go along with anti-gun legislation? Maybe you accomplish that by performing a mass shooting into a crowd that is very likely to be conservative, very likely to vote Republican, very likely to be Trump supporters, very likely to be pro-Second Amendment, and very likely to own guns. Is that what happened in Las Vegas? Is that why the country music festival was targeted?
By the way, the South has a preponderance of these Civil War reenactments. Have you ever seen them? I mean, they love this stuff. Old, out-of-shape men who dress up and drive hundreds of miles to play pretend soldiers. And as comedian Jeff Caldwell points out, there are often more casualties in these reenactments than there were in the actual battle. Greene has made a number of ridiculous statements in the past about the Confederate Army, arguing that black people should be proud of these monuments dedicated to Southern armies. In 2020, Greene claimed that statues of certain American historical figures should not be removed by suggesting this. And whether I see a statue that may be something that I would fully disagree with, like Adolf Hitler, or maybe a statue of Satan himself, I would not want to say, take it down. The battle of statues of Confederate generals who supported slavery,
The taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee,
led to the confrontation in Charlottesville, Virginia, where tiki torch-carrying white supremacists came together and eventually murdered a young woman protesting against the statues.
very fine people on both sides.
But this isn't the first time Greene has displayed insanity. Back in 2021, Greene called for a national divorce scenario, calling for the dissolution of the United States. A year later, she predicted a national divorce in response to the CDC adding COVID shots to its list of recommended vaccine schedules. The use of the word divorce is interesting, as Greene's marriage recently ended while she was calling Fauci a communist and Biden,
Joe Biden, you're not a president, you're a piece of.
She then asked the internet to give her and her husband some privacy.
There's a civil war brewing within the Republican Party, according to Marjorie Taylor Greene.
There's a scrum of GOP MAGA ankle biters who talk all Jefferson Davis when it comes to dividing up America, and it all centers around social issues like prayer in school or trans students and gay marriage. Greene, who McCarthy placed on the Committee for Homeland Security in exchange for her vote for Speaker, represents a Georgia district that overwhelmingly reelected her despite her swamp butt grace and attitude.
There's possible satanic worship.
By the way, Greene's district also has fewer high school graduates than Denny's managers. So there's that.
These are interesting things to look at.
MAGA conservatives love to talk about a civil war coming, but it's all hollow rhetoric.
What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
former President Donald Trump's relentless attacks on the truth has eroded faith in American democracy and its institutions.
You don't trust the election officials?
Nope.
You don't trust the FBI?
Nope.
You don't trust the courts?
Nope.
Who do you trust?
Trump and his supporters.
Over 60% of Republicans say they'd support it, but probably haven't thought it through. I mean, basic American patriotism generally prevents elected officials from endorsing the dissolution of our country. But to that point, we also had every American president in U.S. history leave office peacefully after losing. So what would the U.S. look like if we divided it into blue and red states? Well, for starters, blue states have more money, better colleges, better health care, and in the case of California, all the food they need. They embrace technology, have more young people, and have a much greater chance for self-governance. Red states, on the other hand, have more guns, and from the CDC statistics, that's not good. Red states lead in accidental shootings, suicide, and mass shootings. Red states have more obesity, more violent crime, greater environmental issues, decaying infrastructure, poor water treatment, and about 10% of the tax base and thus revenue of the blue states. Here's the deal. We know it's not going to happen. There's not going to be a civil war, especially since it came out of the minds and mouths of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or George Santos, Ben Shapiro, Dan Bongino, and especially Tucker Carlson, who over the last few weeks has been exposed as a lying puppet for MAGA, calling Trump a demon when the mic was turned off. And the assorted white nationalist groups who act all macho with their open carry rifles and leather jackets, they won't have the health care they need when that extra 70 pounds squeezes their black little hearts into a death grip.
And there are multiple armed groups. Take the Boogaloo Boys, highly suspicious of the authorities and the media, but who agreed to meet us in North Michigan. They say they're not supremacists, just fighting government tyranny.
When Democrats say they wouldn't mind a secession, it's because they know it will never happen. Greene and others can make hay by calling for the end of the U.S. and all their America First BS, but red states aren't all red people. Blue voters would go elsewhere, and the red states would be eventually a few 100,000 people who can't read without moving their lips.
In American history, when you say Civil War, you think about a specific event.
So, it's true, even though there won't be a civil war like the Old North and the South, there will be a dangerous number of Kyle Rittenhouse wannabes who shoot at black and brown people claiming self-defense after they show up with an AR-15. And this being America, the real reason we won't have a civil war is money. There's no money in blowing everything up, but there is money in stirring up, and social media will not back down from its consistent drumbeat of incendiary language, images, videos, and memes. Marjorie Taylor Greene's national divorce won't be a divorce. It'll be more like your parents sleeping in separate rooms and not talking to each other. And then there's that awkward Thanksgiving where your weird Aunt Marjorie has 6 glasses of wine, soils herself, then talks about Jews and their space lasers.
I'm very excited about that.
Looking forward to that. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe and follow us on YouTube at Really American.